Yanil. A quiet, sleepy town in Southern Kandarin, this little village is often forgotten by most players. While it is home to the Magic Guild, little else attracts players here, beyond an ideal spot to trap penguins. Yet this town has several threats that seek to wipe it out, from the ogres of Feldip Hills to the south, to Solarin the Twisted underneath. But despite these long-standing threats, Yanil is painfully neglected. In fact, it looks practically identical to when it was released. And these threats have never really materialized. It's high time that Yanil had a bit more focus on it, and takes center stage for once. What's up, everyone? This is Destroyer229, and welcome to the Hotspot. On today's episode, we'll be looking at the neglected town of Yanil, and seeing what we can do to give it a little more prominence. Not a lot of people pay Yanil much mind, unless your name is Josh, and while the premise of a small town fighting off invading threats seems like an interesting idea, very little has developed to take advantage of this narrative. So, we'll attempt to fix this, and give Yanil the recognition it needs. We'll go over this in 3 parts. First, we'll go over the history of Yanil, and what areas of the game it is tied to. Second, we'll go over a training method to try to get players to head over there. And third, we'll go over a potential story beat that puts Yanil into the quest spotlight. So, to steal a catchphrase, let's go over some fun Yanil facts. Yanil is one of the oldest areas in the game, being released on October 23rd, 2002. Its biggest claim to fame was that it is home to the Magic Guild, an area that, for a time, was essential to many players' magic and runecrafting journeys. The guild has an expansive rune shop, a place to buy mystic robes, some caged zombies to train magic easily in the basement, and was the best place to teleport to the rune essence mine, being the closest teleport spot to a bank. It's also a spot where players can teleport to 3 other towers in the game, being the Wizard's Tower, the Sorcerer's Tower, and the Dark Wizard's Tower. There's also the Yanil Agility Dungeon, which was a way for players to use their agility skill to reach Solarin the Twisted, a mage that is invincible to any attack except those requiring mind runes. Players would fight Solarin for a chance to get a sinister key, which for a time was the only way for players to obtain Torstol herbs for the highest level potions available. However, you'll notice that these areas are deserted nowadays. The Agility Dungeon was made obsolete when Torstols and even Sinister Keys were made available elsewhere, meaning players didn't need level 68 Agility to get this powerful herb. The Magic Guild is all but useless, except for rune runs, as Mystic isn't really relevant nowadays, the zombies are pointless, and the teleports are either meaningless or are more easily acquired elsewhere. But have there been any updates since its release? Well, yes, but not really. Yanil has a hunter shop, which players will rarely visit, a pet shop with an incubator and pets, which are just a few of the hundreds of pets we have in the game, and most recently, it has an invention workbench, which I don't think I've seen anyone ever use. Okay, but what about stories? Well, Yanil is featured heavily in the Watchtower quest, which explains that Yanil is the first line of defense Kandarin has against the ogres. And while this is great for exposition purposes, it doesn't really go anywhere. There are a handful of other quests, like Hand in the Sand and Zogre Flesh Eaters, but those are mostly just involving the Magic Guild and don't really focus on the town itself. And even those have been pretty light. The last quest to even have the player visit even just the Magic Guild was Swan Song, which was released on May 2nd, 2006. There's one story that isn't in Old School, and that's 1 foot in the grave, aka Returning Clarence, a mini quest that was released alongside Back to My Roots on October 9th, 2007. Just 2 months after the backups for Old School. So the fact that we are almost 20 years away from the last story, well, anything involving the area, speaks volumes to its neglected status. So why would players go to Yanil? 3 things: rune runs, penguins, and the Timbo tree. We've already gone over the shop in the Magic Guilds that players often run to in order to make some quick cash, and the walls surrounding Yanil are often a perfect spot for penguin hunters to lure and trap, resulting in easy access to a few penguins in a given week. But what is the Timbo tree? The Timbo tree is the dead tree in the southeast corner of Yanil, behind the house with the anvils and invention workbench. This tree is significant only in that it is a landmark for a specific hard clue step. And that's it. However, this tree was removed in a hidden update sometime in March 2012, and after a massive outcry on the forums, the tree was added back the following month, albeit dead, and with a custom examine. It's almost comical that a meta story involving a tree is more of a story and in more recent memory than an actual narrative in the area. Which again, even this meta story was over a decade ago. So why don't we try to come up with something to entice people to come back here? I think one way we can get people to visit Yanil would be to revamp the Magic Guild. It's the largest landmark by far that the town has, and considering it has a prestigious reputation in-game, it would make sense to try to update the tower to a more modern standard. The only question is, how do we update the tower to make it more inviting to players? Well, one method we could look at would be providing an alternate trading method to runecrafting. To start this, players will need at least 60 runecrafting and access to the Magic Guild. As for some context on why we're doing this, let's say that Wizard Destentor wants to fully test Phoenix's theory that the power of the runecrafting altars are becoming unstable. He will give you a device that, when used on the proper altar, will make a record of the power it has. He wants to be able to do this over time and see if the power of the altars fluctuates, though this research could take several years to prove or disprove the theory. While there are researchers at the altars, he wants to take a more detailed route than just visual observations, which is where you come in. Now, I should state that while the initial idea was conceptualized back in November, I've had to make some changes due to the 110 runecrafting update. Now, on one hand, it does suck to need to head back to the drawing board for quite a few changes, but on the other hand, it has allowed me to fine-tune the idea a bit more and address a niche that I think players will appreciate. How the trading activity works is that he will give you a device to take to a predetermined altar. The device will need to be primed using pure essence, and will require 100 essence to be used on it before being used on an altar. The altars available can be any of the normal runecrafting altars, even those you may not have the level to use. Since you're just using the device and not the actual altar, you won't need the level to craft runes at any given location. But you will still need a way to access every altar, so completing quests like Fight Club or Legacy of Seergaze will be helpful if you don't want to hit a wall. This will also include the Time Altar, so it may be possible to get this altar even if you are below level 100 runecrafting. If you don't have access to an altar, or if you don't want to head to a particular altar, you can redirect it with 1,000 runes from the altar you want to redirect, encouraging players to at least have access to all available altars before beginning. From there, you will need to charge the device, which will take about 2.5 minutes to complete. Once the device is charged, return to Distentor, and he'll give you a flat 20k Runecrafting XP reward for your efforts. You can then talk to him again, and he will send you to a different altar for you to do the process again. This allows the player to get the highest amount of Runecrafting XP per hour, as at max efficiency, players could get around 450,000 XP per hour. This assumes that the player can teleport to the altars immediately, and then immediately teleport back to Distentor with little downtime to replenish the pure essence. Which is absolutely doable, but may require Wicked Hood charges if you don't intend to go through the Abyss. So while sustainable for a while, the player will either need to spend time at the Runespan or get lucky on Treasure Hunter to get more charges. Otherwise, their XP per hour will drop quite a bit. If we want, we can add in 1 XP per essence used throughout the process. That way, this method is also intended to be one of the better spots to attempt to get the skilling pet, and your only role isn't then just to turn in the device. This method is intended to be a more relaxed AFKable way to gain XP, in a manner similar to the new Eternal Magic weapons, though available at a lower level. But XP isn't the only thing you can gain here. For every 5 devices you return, Distentor will give you 1 magic thread. This is intended to be an alternative way to gather magic thread that doesn't rely on lucky drops in the Abyss. The 1.10 Runecrafting update really highlighted a major problem with gathering this resource, and while yes, this will not be so much of a problem in the long term, even if development on this method begins tomorrow, the long Abyss grinds and the threats of PKers hindering people who want a long grind less long method will happen again as soon as Magic Thread is used in some other piece of content. So this method addresses 2 things. It provides a consistent training method that also has a decent chance for unlocking Rue, and it provides a more consistent method to gathering Magic Thread. Now I understand that the 450k per hour XP rate for a level 60 runecrafting method seems insane. But the actual rates would be a lot lower without a lot of preparation. To get to this XP rate, you need not only a consistent supply of Watchtower teleports with the hard Ardoing tasks completed, or the Abyssal Link relic, which by the way requires 112 archaeology and 111 invention, but also a lot of Wicked Hood charges to get to the altars quickly. I mean, you could just use the Abyss, but that does take longer than a direct teleport and thus would also affect the XP per hour, since the big drop comes from turning into the device, not finishing up at the altar, so the Abyss buffs wouldn't apply. And if you do end up with altars you can't reach, then you need to gather a lot of runes to bypass that. I should also note here that bypassing an altar will not make it appear for the next 5 runs. So while this would prevent getting the same altar back to back, there would be no way to block any altars permanently. So, without a ton of prep work, the actual XP per hour will not be as high. Meaning that if you're on the high end and are aiming for 120 runecrafting or 200 million XP, you can expect closer to this max rate, while lower levels may be more incentivized to either gain access to the other altars or just stock up on runes that they plan on skipping. While players are mostly going to be going in and out of Yanil to do this method, it at least brings more foot traffic to the area, so players will at least see a fresh new look while they're runecrafting. But now, let's move on to how we can bring Yanil back into focus with a new storyline. So what sort of stories could we tell surrounding Yanil? Well, I can think of 2 ways that we can tie Yanil to a story beat. 1, we could create an entirely new mini storyline for the area, in about 2 to 3 quests. Or 2, we could tie Yanil to a potential future Kandarin/Ardoin kingdom arc, kind of like how Fort 4 and 3 was tied to Varrock. As for the antagonists, I would like to bring in both the Ogres and Solarin the Twisted to the front, and finally address both threats. Why bring in Solarin? Well, he's perfect for a type of Zamorakian invasion of the area, and for one of the oldest NPCs in the game, it's kind of shocking that nothing's really come from this guy. Like, seriously, what has he been planning for over 2 decades? For Solarin, we can say that he attempted to be part of Zamorak's entourage during either Saliske's game or the Elder God Wars. It doesn't really matter when, just as long as it was during the 6th Age storyline. However, he was only offered the position of a foot soldier. Solarin tried to argue otherwise, that he wanted to spread fear and chaos by cutting off the magical defenses around Kandarin's southern border. But Zamorak did not find the idea appealing. Considering how far away Yanil was to any points of interest, and the fact that they already had a foothold with the Oriania altar, there wasn't much reason to divert their forces for Solarin for what he wanted to do. Moreover, removing their own forces would have likely compromised their position against Saradomin's and the other gods' forces. So while it may have been an interesting idea, it would have been far more costly than anything that would have been gained. Enraged, Solarin rebuffed Zamorak's offer, and was determined to show the Lord of Chaos himself that he was worthy to lead his forces. And now, with Zamorak gone, and the world letting its guard down, he's finally able to make his move and attempt to take over Yanil to raid the Magic Guild. From there, he can plan an assault on the other magic towers and institutions, cutting off the supply of runes and knowledge to much of the Saradomin's lands, and spread chaos and destruction, starting with Kandarin. I would also like to add the Ogres somewhere in these plans. As stated in my previous hotspot on quest lines, the Ogres don't really have a central focus or antagonist to cling to. While they are a threat in Watchtower, you actively help them in Zogre Flesh Eaters and Big Chompy Bird hunting. Hell, the Ogresses are our allies over in Ooglog. So the Ogres' role as antagonists almost seems like a plot hole more than anything, considering they don't reprise that role in any other quests. I mean, it's not a plot hole, but it just feels very inconsistent compared to other quests that we've mentioned. Hell, Scavids were introduced in Watchtower, and were never used again. So dealing with the whole enslaved race thing seems like a pretty good thing to do. So during this short questline, we can focus on a singular ogre shaman that survived the Watchtower quest and is helping Solarin. And after liberating the Scavids and getting some allies like Chief Tess, Rant, Grish, and Scratch Uglogwi, we can put a stop to the Ogre Shaman and Solarin and finally make peace with Gutanoth and Yanil. Finally, if we want to try to tie any other characters here, Ariane's a pretty good candidate. Perhaps she'd been following a lead on a possible Zamorakian incursion, which is what leads us to Solarin, or maybe she just happened to be visiting the Magic Guild when all of this is starting to go down. Ariane is pretty open-ended on the possibility of uses for future quest lines, especially with the Elder Gods taken care of. So why not make use of a free agent with ties to other magic institutions? And so those are my ideas to help bring importance back to Yanil. What do you think? Do you have any ideas on story beats you'd like to see in a story centered around Yanil? Do you have any suggestions on uses of anima fragments? Do you have any thoughts on other things you'd like to see in an updated Yanil? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video. So, until next time everyone, take care.